What happens when a beloved actress steps onto a daytime talk show stage, expecting a friendly conversation, only to be ambushed by a host who seems more interested in controversy than conversation? In just 47 seconds, one careless comment from Denise Welch would turn a seemingly normal interview into one of the most shocking moments in British television history, leaving the studio audience gasping and the cameras rolling as everything fell apart. The Loose Women set looked bright and cheerful that afternoon. The panel sat behind their desk, coffee mugs positioned perfectly, smiles plastered on their faces for the cameras. Denise Welch sat at the center, flanked by Kay Adams and Jane Moore, with Carol McGiffin rounding out the panel. They were ready for their guest, the incomparable Miriam Margolyes, actress, raconteur, and someone who never minced words. Miriam walked onto the set with her characteristic waddle, waving to the audience, who erupted in applause. She had that twinkle in her eye, that mischievous energy that made her such a beloved figure. She settled into the guest chair, adjusting her colorful scarf and beaming at the panel. "Miriam, lovely to have you here," Kay Adams started warmly. "You've been doing so much lately. Tell us about your new project." Miriam launched into an enthusiastic description of a documentary she'd been working on, traveling across Britain and meeting everyday people. Her passion was infectious as she described the fishermen in Scotland, the farmers in Wales, the shopkeepers in small towns who rarely got their voices heard. "These are the real people," Miriam said, her voice rising with emotion. "Not the celebrities, not the politicians who talk and say nothing. Real people with real lives and real struggles." The audience clapped appreciatively. Jane Moore nodded along, clearly engaged with what Miriam was saying. Carol McGiffin leaned back in her chair, a genuine smile on her face, as she listened to Miriam's infectious enthusiasm. "That sounds absolutely wonderful," Carol said. "I think people are hungry for that kind of authentic storytelling." "Exactly," Miriam agreed, her eyes lighting up even more. "People are tired of being talked at. They want to be heard. They want to share their experiences, their wisdom. And let me tell you, the wisdom I encountered in these small towns and villages put most of Westminster to shame." The audience laughed and clapped again. Kay Adams was about to ask another question when Denise Welch leaned forward, and something shifted in the atmosphere. The air seemed to grow heavier, charged with a tension that hadn't been there moments before. "Well, Miriam, speaking of real people," Denise said, her voice taking on an edge that made everyone pause. "I have to say, I find it quite rich that you're suddenly so interested in ordinary folks when you've spent your entire career in the most elite circles imaginable." The studio went quiet. Miriam's smile faltered for just a moment. "I'm sorry," Miriam said, her eyebrows raising. "Oh, come on," Denise continued, waving her hand dismissively. "You went to Cambridge, didn't you? You've been in Hollywood films. You know all these famous people. You've lived this incredibly privileged life. And now you want to parade around Britain pretending you understand what it's like to struggle." Kay Adams shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Denise, I don't think that's quite fair." But Denise wasn't finished. No, I think it needs to be said. I'm tired of celebrities swooping in with their cameras, getting their little documentary made, and then going back to their comfortable lives while pretending they've done something meaningful." Miriam sat very still, her hands folded in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was measured but firm. "Denise, I think you've misunderstood the entire point of what I'm trying to do." "Have I, though?" Denise shot back. "Because it seems pretty clear to me. It's poverty tourism, isn't it? It's you getting to feel good about yourself while actual working-class people get used for content." The audience murmured uncomfortably. Carol McGiffin touched Denise's arm gently, as if trying to signal her to pull back, but Denise shrugged her off. "I come from a working-class background myself," Miriam said, her voice growing stronger. "My father was a doctor, yes, but my mother's family were poor Scottish immigrants. I know what it means to work hard. I know what it means to fight for every opportunity. I grew up watching my mother scrimp and save. I watched her make a shilling stretch further than should have been possible. I learned about struggle from her stories, from her determination to give me a better life than she had. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. And yes, I went to Cambridge. Yes, I had opportunities, but I earned every single one of them. Scholarships, Denise, working multiple jobs while studying, going without so I could afford books. That's not privilege handed to me on a silver platter. That's privilege I fought tooth and nail for. A doctor's daughter calling herself working class, Denise said with a bitter laugh. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You have no idea. Jane Moore finally spoke up. Denise, this is getting really uncomfortable. Miriam is our guest. Our guest who needs to hear some truth, Denise replied sharply. I'm sorry, but someone has to say it. These vanity projects where wealthy people go slumming it with the poor for a few weeks and then collect their awards and their praise, it's disgusting. Miriam's face had gone red, not with embarrassment, but with anger. How dare you? Miriam said quietly. How dare I what? Denise challenged. How dare I point out the obvious? How dare I not sit here and fawn over you like everyone else does? How dare you make assumptions about my motivations? Miriam said, her voice rising. How dare you sit there in your comfortable television job, making your comfortable television salary, and lecture me about understanding real people? You don't know me. You don't know what I've done, or why I've done it. I know what I see, Denise said coldly. I see another celebrity trying to stay relevant by attaching themselves to social issues they don't actually care about. Kay Adams tried again. Let's just take a breath here. This conversation has gotten way off track. But Miriam was standing now, her small frame somehow seeming to fill the entire studio. You want to know about real people, Denise? Let me tell you about real people. The woman I met in Newcastle, who works 3 jobs to feed her children and still finds time to volunteer at the food bank. The man in Cornwall who lost his fishing business because of policies made by people in London who've never set foot in his town. The nurse in Manchester who told me she cries in her car before every shift because she's so exhausted, but she goes in anyway because her patients need her. Her voice was shaking with passion now. I met a teacher in Birmingham who spends her own money on supplies for her students because the school budget has been cut to nothing. I met a grandfather in Leeds who takes care of his 3 grandchildren because their parents are working 2 jobs each just to keep a roof over their heads. I met young people, brilliant young people, who have given up on their dreams because they can't see a way forward. Miriam's hands were gesturing emphatically now, punctuating every word. I sat in their homes. I drank their tea. I looked at their family photos. I heard about their parents and grandparents, the sacrifices that were made, the hopes that were crushed, the resilience that kept them going. And every single one of them, every single person, treated me with more grace and kindness than you've shown me in the last 10 minutes. The audience erupted in applause. Some people were standing now, showing their support. These people opened their homes to me. They shared their stories with me. And you know what? They didn't ask me where I went to university. They didn't ask me how much money I have in the bank. They saw that I cared, that I listened, that I treated them with respect and dignity. Anyone can pretend to care when the cameras are rolling, Denise interjected, her voice cutting through the applause like a knife. The audience went silent again, the mood shifting from supportive to shocked. Pretend? Miriam's voice went very quiet, which somehow made it more powerful. Did you just accuse me of pretending to care about people? I'm saying it's easy to play the saint when you know it's going to make you look good, Denise said, doubling down. When you know there's a documentary deal at the end of it, when you know it'll boost your profile. Miriam stood completely still for a moment, and when she spoke, her words were measured and deliberate. The cameras weren't always rolling, Miriam fired back. I spent hours, days, weeks with these people. Do you know how long it takes to build trust with someone who's been let down by the system, by the government, by people who promised to help and then disappeared? It takes time. It takes patience. It takes genuine care. She took a step closer to the desk, her presence filling the space. I stayed in their homes, Denise. Not fancy hotels. Their homes. I slept on their sofas. I helped wash dishes. I played with their children. I sat with their elderly parents. I attended their community meetings. I went to their churches, their mosques, their community centers. I showed up. Not for an hour with a film crew and then off to the next location. I showed up and I stayed. Her voice cracked slightly with emotion. I ate at their tables. I met their families. I heard about their dreams and their fears. I heard about sons who died too young. I heard about daughters who moved away for work and rarely visit. I heard about medical bills that can't be paid, about roofs that leak, about cars that won't start, about all the small indignities that add up to a life of struggle. A tear rolled down Miriam's cheek, and she didn't bother to wipe it away. And yes, I had the privilege of getting an education. And yes, I've had opportunities that others haven't had. But instead of sitting in some ivory tower feeling guilty about it, I'm using those opportunities to amplify voices that don't usually get heard, because that's what privilege should be for. Not to separate yourself from others, but to build bridges. Carol McGiffin finally spoke. Miriam, I think what you're doing sounds wonderful. Well, I think it sounds patronizing, Denise snapped at her co-panelist. And I'm allowed to have that opinion. You're allowed to have your opinion, Miriam said, her voice like steel. But you're not allowed to insult me on national television and expect me to sit here and take it. Jane Moore looked at the camera operator nervously, clearly wondering if they should cut to commercial. I haven't insulted you, Denise said. I've simply asked you some hard questions. Hard questions? Miriam repeated incredulously. You've accused me of exploiting poor people. You've dismissed my entire project without having seen a single frame of it. You've questioned my integrity, my motivations, my entire character, and you call that asking hard questions? If you can't handle criticism, maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye, Denise said with a shrug. Criticism? Miriam's voice was getting louder. There's a difference between criticism and character assassination, Denise, and what you've done here today is the latter. Criticism would be saying you think the documentary format is flawed. Criticism would be asking how I plan to ensure the people featured are treated fairly. Criticism would be engaging with the actual work. What you've done is attack me. Personally, question my motives and dismiss the entire project without knowing a single thing about it. She was breathing heavily now, her small chest rising and falling with emotion. You've sat there with your makeup done and your hair styled, in your television studio with your television salary, and you've told me that I don't understand real people. You've suggested I'm exploiting them. You've implied I'm doing this for my own ego. And you've done all of this without asking me a single genuine question about the work itself. Miriam's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire studio. That's not journalism, Denise. That's not even good television. That's just cruelty dressed up as honesty. The audience was completely silent now, watching this confrontation unfold with a mixture of horror and fascination. Character assassination is a bit dramatic, don't you think? Denise said, rolling her eyes. Is it? Miriam challenged. You've sat there and told me, and everyone watching, that I don't care about people, that I'm using them, that everything I do is about my own ego. How is that not an attack on my character? Kay Adams made one more attempt to salvage the situation. Why don't we talk about something else? Miriam, you've got a book coming out soon, don't you? But Miriam wasn't ready to move on. No, Kay, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I think this needs to be addressed. Because if Denise can sit here and say these things to me, on air, imagine what she says about other people. Imagine how she treats guests who aren't as equipped to defend themselves. Oh, so now I'm a bully, Denise said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. That's a nice twist. You come on here with your little documentary about how much you love the working classes. I dare to question it. And suddenly I'm the villain. You're not the villain for questioning me, Miriam said. You're the villain for the way you've done it. There's a way to have a challenging conversation without being cruel, Denise. Clearly you haven't learned that yet. Denise's face flushed. I am not cruel. I'm honest. Maybe that's a problem for you. Maybe you're used to people just telling you how wonderful you are. But in the real world, people don't always agree with you. Being honest doesn't give you license to be hurtful, Carol McGiffin interjected. There's a way to disagree without being disagreeable, and you've crossed that line. Oh, so now everyone's ganging up on me? Denise said, looking around at her co-hosts. Is that it? Poor Miriam needs protecting from Big Bad Denise? Nobody's ganging up on you, Jane Moore said firmly. We're trying to tell you that this has gone too far. You've made your point. You've expressed your skepticism. But now, you're just being mean. Mean? Denise laughed bitterly. I'm being mean? What about all the people who've been exploited by documentary makers? What about their feelings? Or do they not matter because they're not famous? In the real world, Miriam said, her voice shaking, people also have basic manners. They have respect for others. They don't launch into personal attacks the moment someone sits down across from them. In the real world, Denise, people actually listen to each other before making judgments. She paused, collecting herself. You talk about exploitation. You talk about documentary makers using people. But you know what? You haven't asked me about my approach. You haven't asked about consent forms, about how profits will be shared, about the editorial control the participants have. You haven't asked about any of the ethical considerations I've spent months working through. You've just assumed the worst about me and run with it. Kay Adams nodded. That's actually a really good point, Miriam. Can you tell us about those considerations? No, Miriam said sharply. No, I'm not going to do that now, because it shouldn't take a defensive explanation for people to give me the benefit of the doubt. I've spent 50 years in this industry. I've built a reputation. I've earned trust. And I'm not going to justify my integrity to someone who's already decided I have none. Personal attacks? Denise laughed harshly. I've talked about your work, your project. How is that personal? You've questioned my entire moral foundation, Miriam said. You've suggested I'm a fraud, that I'm using vulnerable people for my own gain. That's not about my work, Denise. That's about who I am as a person. Jane Moore tried to interject. Maybe we can all just take a moment to... No, Miriam cut her off, but gently. I appreciate you trying to help, Jane, but this has gone too far. Denise, I came here today in good faith. I came here to talk about a project I'm passionate about, a project that means the world to me. And you've done nothing but tear it down. Tear me down from the moment I started speaking. If you can't handle a bit of pushback, Denise started. This isn't pushback. Miriam's voice echoed through the studio. Pushback would be saying you have concerns about the format, or asking thoughtful questions about my approach. Pushback would be bringing up specific examples of problematic documentaries and asking how mine will be different. Pushback would be engaging with me intellectually, professionally. This is you using me as a target for whatever anger you're carrying around, and I won't stand for it. The audience gasped. Some people started clapping, but it was scattered and uncertain. Don't you dare try to psychoanalyze me, Denise hissed, her composure finally cracking. You know nothing about what I'm going through, what I think, what I feel. Then enlighten me, Miriam challenged. Tell me what this is really about. Because I don't believe for 1 second that this vitriol is actually about my documentary. The studio went deathly quiet. Even the crew seemed to freeze, sensing they We're witnessing something unprecedented. How dare you psychoanalyze me, Denise said, her voice going very quiet and very cold. You don't know anything about me. I know what you've shown me today, Miriam replied, and it's not pretty. It's not kind. It's not fair. It's not the behavior of someone who actually cares about the issues they claim to care about. You don't get to tell me what I care about, Denise shot back. And you don't get to tell me what my intentions are, Miriam countered. But that hasn't stopped you, has it? Kay Adams put her head in her hands. This was clearly spiraling beyond anyone's control. Jane Moore reached over and touched Kay's arm, a gesture of solidarity and shared concern. You know what your problem is, Miriam, Denise said, leaning forward aggressively. You can dish it out, but you can't take it. You're happy to be provocative and controversial when it suits you, but the moment someone challenges you, you fall apart. I'm not falling. Apart, Miriam said, her voice deadly calm now. I'm simply refusing to be disrespected. Oh, disrespected, Denise mocked. Poor Miriam Margolyes, feeling disrespected on a talk show. Do you know how many people would kill for the opportunities you've had? Do you know how many people face real disrespect, real discrimination, real hardship every single day? And there it is, Miriam said quietly. There's the real cruelty. You're using those people, the ones you claim to care about, as a weapon against me. You're exploiting their struggles to score points in an argument. That's truly vile, Denise. That's actually disgusting. Carol McGiffin stood up from her chair. Okay, I think we really need to stop this now. This has gone way beyond a normal disagreement. This is uncomfortable for everyone watching, uncomfortable for us, and completely unfair to Miriam. Sit down, Carol, Denise said dismissively. No, Carol said firmly. I won't sit down, and I won't sit here quietly while you treat a guest this way. We invited Miriam here. She's done nothing wrong, and you've spent the entire interview attacking her. Has it? Denise said, turning on Carol. Or is it just that none of you have the backbone to say what needs to be said? What needs to be said, Carol replied firmly, is that we invited Miriam here as our guest, and we're treating her appallingly. Thank you, Carol, Miriam said quietly. Denise glared at Carol. So, you're taking her side? I'm not taking sides, Carol said. I'm pointing out that this has become uncomfortable for everyone. Maybe uncomfortable conversations are necessary sometimes, Denise said stubbornly. This isn't a conversation anymore, Jane Moore said, speaking up again. This is an attack, and it needs to stop. Denise looked around at her fellow panelists, her expression a mixture of defiance and something that might have been hurt. Fine, she said. If you all want to gang up on me, fine, but don't pretend. This is about protecting Miriam. This is about you all being too cowardly to ask real questions. We're not cowards, Kay Adams said, her voice sharper than it had been all show. We're professionals who know how to conduct an interview without attacking our guests. Miriam stood completely still, watching this all unfold. The other panelists were now arguing among themselves, and she seemed to realize that this had spiraled far beyond her. You know what? Miriam said, loud enough to cut through the crosstalk. I don't need to be here for this. Everyone stopped and looked at her. Miriam, please, Kay started. No, Miriam said, shaking her head. I've sat here and been insulted. I've defended myself. I've watched you all argue about me like I'm not even here. And I've had enough. You're just going to walk off? Denise said, and there was something almost triumphant in her voice. Yes, Miriam said simply. Because I have more self-respect than to sit here and be treated this way. She unclipped her microphone with steady hands. The sound technician started to approach, but she'd already placed it carefully on the chair. Miriam, please, we can sort this out, Jane Moore said, standing up. Can we? Miriam asked. Because I don't see Denise apologizing. I don't see her acknowledging that she's been out of line. So, what exactly are we sorting out? All eyes turned to Denise, who sat with her arms crossed, her jaw set. I have nothing to apologize for, Denise said. I asked legitimate questions. There it is, Miriam said softly. That's your answer, everyone. No apology, no acknowledgement, no remorse. Why should I apologize for doing my job? Denise demanded. Your job is to interview guests, not to berate them, Carol said, her voice sharp. I didn't berate anyone, Denise insisted. You absolutely did, Kay Adams said. Miriam, on behalf of the show, I'm so sorry. I appreciate that, Kay, Miriam said. But an apology from... The show doesn't make up for the behavior of one of its hosts. She gathered her bag, a beautiful carpet bag that looked like it had traveled the world with her. This documentary, she said, turning to face the camera directly, it's about kindness. It's about compassion. It's about seeing the humanity in every person you meet. Those are values I try to live by, and they're values I saw in every single person I interviewed. It's a shame I didn't find those values here today. The camera operator zoomed in on her face, capturing every ounce of dignity and disappointment etched there. Miriam, you're being ridiculous, Denise said. Sit down. Let's talk about this like adults. Like adults? Miriam turned to her, eyebrows raised. You mean the way you've spoken to me like an adult this entire time? With respect and consideration? Denise had no answer to that. I thought not, Miriam said. She walked toward the edge of the set, her small figure somehow commanding every eye in the room. Miriam, please, Kay called after her. Don't leave like this. Miriam paused at the edge of the stage. For a moment, it seemed like she might turn around, might give them another chance. But then she looked back at Denise, still sitting there with her arms crossed, still refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing, and something in Miriam's expression hardened. I've spent my entire life standing up to bullies, she said clearly. I'm not about to stop now. And with that, she walked off the set. The studio fell into chaos. The audience didn't know whether to clap or gasp. The producers were shouting into their headsets. The other panelists sat frozen, looking at each other in shock. Denise sat very still, staring at the spot where Miriam had been sitting. Well, she said finally, her voice brittle, that was dramatic. Denise, Carol said quietly, you really crossed a line. Did I? Denise said. Or did she just prove my point by throwing a tantrum and storming off? That wasn't a tantrum, Jane Moore said. That was someone with enough self-respect to remove themselves from a hostile situation. Oh, please, Denise said, but her voice lacked conviction now. Kay Adams was pressing her finger to her earpiece, listening to the producers. We need to go to commercial, she said. Now. But before they could cut away, before the cameras could stop rolling, the audience made their feelings known. They started clapping. Slowly at first, then building. A wave of applause that was clearly in support of Miriam. Clearly a rebuke to what had just happened. Denise's face went pale as she realized the audience wasn't on her side. We'll be right back, Kay said desperately to the camera. And finally, mercifully, they cut away. But the damage was done. In 47 seconds of careless, cruel comments, Denise Welch had turned what should have been a pleasant interview into a disaster. She had attacked a beloved actress, alienated her fellow panelists, and lost the support of the studio audience. Backstage, Miriam Margolyes was already in her car, being driven away from the studio. She looked out the window at the gray London sky, and despite everything, she smiled. Because she had done something important. She had stood up for herself. She had refused to be diminished. And she had walked away with her dignity intact. That was worth more than any television appearance could ever be.